So I'm done with my Brookings Institute talk. And the first thing up in my list is some kind of like picture video, where it's just like pictures with music playing in the background, trying to convince me that Atlantis was in Bolivia. Seemed like a reasonable argument up until I got to this point where they want to tell me that they found a dish with Sumerian writing in Bolivia. You lost me there. That's not likely. That said, if we forget about this and what exactly it is that has to do with Atlantis, I'm not sure, but I'm still eating. If you ignore this rather egregious error, the truth is that it is a relatively convincing argument, but you could say the same thing about 100 different places, right? To me, the question of exactly where it is kind of doesn't matter. It's kind of the wrong question. It seems to me like it's partially based on Carthage. And it seemed to be like what Plato or whatever writer that we've claimed as Plato was trying to get across was this idea of projecting Carthage out into the ocean. And you kind of want to ask the question of why. Could it be because the Carthaginians were known to do that, known to go out past the Pillars of Hercules and bring back large amounts of gold? I mean, it's obviously a story, right? And trying to locate the exact whereabouts of this city that is meant to tell a story is perhaps not worthwhile. Although, had the barbarian Romans not burnt the city to the ground, along with Corinth, I might add, there might be more records of these voyages out past the Pillars of Hercules. To me, the more important part is not, whether Atlantis existed or where it might be, but the reality that Plato seemed to know that there was a very large continent beyond the Pillars of Hercules. Now, I know it's easy. I mean, there's only two options, and you got a 50% chance one way or the other, right? But if you really believed in the world as you saw it, you wouldn't do that, right? You would send something out if you were unsure, and if you were sure, you would accept things as they are. Just the fact that he seemed certain that this area existed, again, a very large continent. One of the arguments that they present in this picture video is the idea that it has to be South America because it's bigger than Africa and Asia combined, or what the Greeks called Asia. But the Greeks had no concept of size, of geographical space. You want to look at one of their maps and try not to laugh too hard. You can generally get these shapes out properly, but it wasn't even close, broadly speaking, in terms of proportions and distances. So you'll see things like, for example, you'll see that the Italian peninsula is wider than the Iberian peninsula, which is ridiculous, right? Or you'll see things like that Crete is larger than Britain. And I'm not making this stuff up. If you look at the old maps, that's what you see. Like they're not even close. So, this idea. I mean, he could have been talking about the Canary Islands, but he probably wasn't. Again, it doesn't. I don't think it really matters whether this Atlantis was in Bolivia, or at the mouth of the Mississippi, or perhaps in Mexico, or even in the St. Lawrence. Just the fact that Plato, writing at that stage in history, seemed to realize that there was a large continent past the Pillars of Hercules, is indicative that a lot of information was lost when the Roman Empire was establishing itself. And it wasn't lost by accident. It was burned. It was destroyed. Let's skip over how you would keep that a secret, and talk more about why you would keep it a secret. And it's obvious. If you're, a well-to-do elite family, and you have a trade where you are able to generate large amounts of gold out of almost nothing of value to you, you would do that. And you wouldn't want anyone else to know about it. So he asked the question, why were the Carthaginians so focused on their... My battery went out again. It happens. Death, taxes, and batteries going out. So yeah, why were the Carthaginians so concerned about those Spanish colonies? Now, I mean, there could be any number of reasons why. It's not any positive evidence. I'm aware of all of this. And the positive evidence that does exist is subject to interpretation. But I think that the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. We're not talking about, Vikings here at 1,000 years, into the Common Era. We're talking about, 1,000 years before the Common Era. 3,000 years ago. And, we don't know the nature, the depth of the contact. We know that records here were destroyed by the Romans. And we know that if there were any records here, they were also destroyed by the Romans. So, I guess the lesson is that if you have records, keep them away from the Romans. I think it's overwhelming that Atlantis was one of the Americas. Very little of what Plato wrote has to be true in order to realize that there's something profound about the fact that he knew that there was a continent out there. And that's really what should be maybe pulled out as more important in the whole story. And it's obviously a parable, right?